10 years ago, the world watched as the American-led invasion of Iraq began. The conflict has killed more than 130,000 Iraqis and nearly 5,000 coalition troops, many of them from the U.S. Here's a look back at some of the key moments in the conflict.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. By removing Saddam Hussein from power, America is safer and the world is better off.
Well, as well as the human cost, the Iraq war took a huge financial toll. Fresh research out of the United States shows it's cost Washington $1.7 trillion so far. But that is not the end of the story, far from it. The total price tag could rise to more than $6 trillion over the next 40 years. That includes benefits that will have to be paid to military veterans, future commitments, and the biggest slice, interest payments on the money that the United States has had to borrow to pay for it all. Now, one of the architects of the war was Paul Wolfowitz, the former U.S. Deputy Defense Secretary. He spoke to Fareed Zakaria on GPS about the legacy of the decisions made more than 10 years ago and whether he thought it was all worth it.
The price was high, and I think the price in lives is the one I feel the most acutely. But this is a critical part of the world. I would like as much as anyone to be able to say, let's forget about the Persian Gulf, let's forget about the larger Middle East, let's focus on Asia, where I've spent a good part of my career and which is a much more satisfying place to work. But that part of the world isn't leaving us alone. Al-Qaeda isn't leaving us alone. Pakistan isn't leaving us alone. We have secured some real gains at very high cost, admittedly, in both Afghanistan and Iraq. But if we throw away those gains now, and if we throw away the lessons that have been learned, and it seems to me in Syria, we're throwing away the lesson not of Iraq 2003, but Iraq 1991.
As the former Deputy U.S. Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz just pointed out there, the Middle East still suffers from major instability. And that's a big factor that has hampered efforts to exploit oil reserves in the region. But in Iraq, the government has big hopes for the energy sector. And as John Defterius shows us, foreign companies are getting in on the action.
The rolling hills of northern Iraq helped the Kurdish region earn the nickname as the Switzerland of the Middle East. But beneath the greenery lies an abundance of black gold.
I think Iraq is the last untapped resource of low-cost oil and gas left in the world. Everything else is now Arctic or deep offshore.
The potential bounty brought the Jaffer family, Arab Iraqis originally from Baghdad, back into the country for business for the first time in 4 decades.
Here in Iraq, we've only drilled a couple of thousand wells compared to about 40,000 in Saudi and over 1 million just in the state of Texas.
The natural gas, pumped through a 190-kilometer pipeline, supplies power for the region's 2 main cities, Sulaymaniyah and Erbil. It may be boom time here in Iraq and energy control panels like this one here in the Kurdish region, but it's also a game of catch-up after nearly a quarter-century of conflict. Just a few kilometers down the road from the gas field, I'm shown a stark reminder of Saddam Hussein's atrocities from the 1980s.
There was, like a mass graves, thousands of people, they were lost, and too many mass graves, were found in this region.
In a place where so much has been lost, the past is remembered as they set their sights on what they hope will be a better future. That includes leveraging Iraq's proven oil reserves, officially 143 billion barrels. Todd Kozel is a second-generation oil man from the United States. He started drilling at the Shaykhon field 3 years ago. It is 10 times bigger than he had ever hoped for.
Shaykhon is the largest discovery in Kurdistan. We got very lucky with our exploration. It is a field that's estimated to have 13 to 15 billion barrels of oil in place. It is a massive discovery.
Kozel, like many others, believes the Kurdish region alone could have 40 billion barrels, meaning a similar size to oil-rich Libya. Gulf Keystone and Crescent Petroleum were the early movers, but the U.S. oil giants ExxonMobil and Chevron are not far behind.
Yes. And of course, there's some pipeline politics at play here as well. The federal government's resisting seeing the larger deals being done here in the Kurdish region. In fact, the Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, suggests if the super majors want to come up to the north, they have to risk being cut out of the giant fields of southern Iraq.
Oil executives say this infighting between Iraq and Kurdistan, which is a semi-autonomous region, is holding back investment. Iraq planned to see a fourfold increase to 12 million barrels a day by 2017. It downgraded that number to 10 million by 2020. But the International Energy Agency says it will be closer to 6 million.
It was really very much in its infancy.
Majid Jafar says uncertainty is leaving huge swaths of Iraq unexplored.
But there are over 300 structures in the western desert of Iraq which are not even drilled yet. So actually the exploration and development of the Iraqi oil and gas sector is in its infancy.
And why Iraq, 10 years after the fall of Saddam Hussein, will remain an energy man's priority for decades to come. John Defterios, CNN, in the Cormor field of northern Iraq.
Now, still ahead on World Business Today, a saving scare in Cyprus as the president tells bank customers